Let's get straight to the point. Do you really like what you think you like? Think about it. Every time you pick up your phone and start scrolling without even realizing what you're doing, every time you open another tab in your browser to see something that deep down doesn't really interest you, every time you eat without hunger, laugh without joy, consume without need. Who is enjoying this moment? You or the system that has conditioned you to seek immediate pleasure? The truth, uncomfortable as it may be, is that you were programmed to chase pleasure, but never to actually achieve it. And the worst thing is that this has happened without you realizing it. You've become a slave to impulses you didn't choose, to habits that have been shaped to keep you distracted, to an endless circuit of stimuli that promise satisfaction but never actually deliver it. Because the logic of the system isn't to satisfy you, it's to keep you wanting more. We live in an age where pleasure is just a click away, where any need can be met instantly. But if access to pleasure is so easy, why does it never seem to be enough? Why is it that the more we consume, the emptier we feel? Aldous Huxley predicted this almost a century ago. He warned us that true control would not come through direct oppression, but through pleasure. The domination of the masses would not happen through force, but through distraction. A world where it wouldn't be necessary to burn books because people would simply lose interest in reading them. Where the truth wouldn't need to be hidden because it would be buried under an avalanche of irrelevance. A world where no one would need to be controlled because everyone would be too addicted to their own slavery. And look around you. You are exactly in that world. Huxley's world. The world where every desire can be satisfied in seconds, where gratification is immediate, but the feeling of emptiness only grows. A world where pleasure is no longer a prize, but a drug, because that's what they've done with pleasure. They've turned it into a control mechanism. Every notification you receive, every short video you watch, every superficial piece of content you mindlessly consume is part of a system designed to hijack your attention and fragment your ability to focus on what really matters. Momentary pleasure is no longer a luxury, but a hook. It pulls you into an endless cycle of dopamine-seeking, ephemeral rewards that never fully satisfy. You swipe the screen one more time, hoping to find something that hooks you, something that finally fills you up, but you don't. Because that's the whole point of the game. You don't find anything, because that's the game's purpose, to keep you always looking, always wanting, but never satisfied. And the scariest thing, it happens without you realizing it, without you questioning it, without you noticing that. While you're seeking pleasure, you're actually wasting time, losing presence, losing yourself. Do you believe that you are free because you can choose what you consume? But who is really choosing when all the options have been meticulously designed to grab your attention? Look around you. Notice the amount of stimuli vying for your mind. Every notification, every sound, every flash of color that appears on the screen. All this is no accident. They are traps camouflaged as entertainment. Immediate pleasure has become the new form of dictatorship. It's no longer necessary to punish. It's enough to entertain. They don't need to repress, just stimulate. They don't lock you in a cell. They just fill your life with distractions that keep you paralyzed. And so, millions of people lose themselves in ephemeral pleasures while their reality crumbles before their eyes. Because this isn't just entertainment. It's an addictive cycle where what is sought is not pleasure itself, but the next dose. And like any addiction, satisfaction never comes. The desire is always renewed, always growing, always asking for more. Food is no longer nourishment. Now, it's just a vehicle for dopamine, transformed into sugar and fat, designed to trick the brain and trap you in an unhealthy relationship with food. Social media isn't connection. It's just sparks of artificial validation, momentary injections of approval that are more addictive than any drug. The content we consume is not learning, but mental anesthesia, something to fill time without provoking reflection, without requiring effort, without generating real growth. We've been sold the lie that pleasure is the purpose of life. But what if pleasure is actually poison? Aldous Huxley had already warned that the future would not be marked by oppression, but by distraction. And that future has arrived. We live in an era where there is no need to censor ideas. Just bury them under an avalanche of irrelevant stimuli. There's no need to ban knowledge. Just make sure no one has the patience to seek it out. The real problem is that each new dose of cheap pleasure weakens our ability to feel real pleasure. Children can no longer concentrate on a book, but spend hours glued to videos that last only a few seconds. Adults can't stand silence, but fill every minute of the day with meaningless noise. Relationships crumble because no one is willing to put in the effort anymore. When instant gratification is just a click away, effortless pleasure destroys the ability to fight for what really matters, because what brings the most pleasure in life requires effort. It requires time, dedication, and patience. The problem has never been pleasure, but how easy it has become. Think about it. Why has love become disposable? Because there are endless options, always available, always ready to replace any relationship that requires commitment. Why have people given up on big dreams? Because immediate gratification seems more accessible and less risky. Why do we never feel completely satisfied? Because fleeting pleasure never fills the void. And so, pleasure becomes a weapon. It keeps you distracted while your life goes by. It keeps you addicted while your ability to feel real pleasure deteriorates. It keeps you trapped in the endless search for something that will never come. Because pleasure isn't the problem. The problem is the price you pay for it. And the question that remains is, how long are you willing to keep paying? But perhaps the biggest trap is not dependence on pleasure, but the illusion that we need it. We grew up being taught that happiness lies in enjoyment, but no one taught us to endure boredom. No one taught us that sometimes true growth comes from effort, from discomfort, from the ability to remain silent without looking for a distraction. The question that remains is not just whether you are addicted to pleasure, but whether you have already lost the ability to live without it. Nobody prepared us for emptiness. No one taught us that real life worth living, is not an endless succession of exciting moments, but a journey full of challenges, difficulties, periods of boredom and effort with no immediate reward. Instead, we've been sold the illusion that everything should be stimulating, easy, and pleasurable. And now, every time we come across something difficult, we feel that something is wrong. If studying isn't fun, we give up. If a relationship has problems, we discard it. If a project requires dedication without instant gratification, we put it off until later. Modernity has conditioned us to be impatient, made us believe that any discomfort is a mistake, taught us to run away from emptiness instead of understanding it. And what has been the result? A society unable to tolerate the slightest frustration. A generation of people who need constant stimulation so that they don't have to face their own thoughts. People who fill every silence with noise, who feel uncomfortable in their own presence, who no longer know how to deal with stillness because they have been taught to fear it. The false promise of constant pleasure has led us to a cruel paradox. The easier it becomes to obtain pleasure, the harder it becomes to achieve true happiness. The human brain was not designed to live in a continuous state of reward. When everything is pleasure, nothing is special. When everything is immediate, nothing has value. When everything is easy, life loses its meaning. And yet, here we are, increasing the dose, endlessly searching for the next injection of dopamine, the next video, the next message, the next stimulus that will make us forget for a brief moment, the emptiness growing inside us. But there's something even worse. They're not just stealing your happiness, they're stealing your ability to think, because a mind addicted to pleasure is a mind incapable of questioning, incapable of reflecting, incapable of seeing beyond the next distraction. And that, when it comes to social control, is checkmate. They keep us entertained so that we don't realize what they're taking away from us. Remember when it was possible to concentrate for hours on a single activity without having to check your cell phone every minute? Remember when boredom didn't seem like torture, but a natural part of life? Remember when your attention wasn't fragmented into 1,000 pieces? When you could really absorb a book, immerse yourself in a conversation, be present in a moment without the need for an external stimulus, all that has been programmed to disappear. Distraction is not just a side effect of the digital age, but a carefully designed tool to weaken your mind. The more addicted to quick pleasure you become, the less patience you have for seeking knowledge, the less tolerance you have for reflection, the less energy you have left to question the reality around you. When was the last time you were alone with your thoughts without feeling the urge to fill the silence? When was the last time you decided to do something difficult, not because it was pleasurable, but because you knew it was important? We've been taught that happiness is the same as comfort, but that's a lie. Excessive comfort dulls the senses, destroys ambition, and turns you into a shadow of your former self. True growth comes from resisting easy pleasure, from the ability to get frustrated without giving up, to endure discomfort without looking for an immediate escape. But who is still willing to do that? Because the problem isn't just pleasure, it's the price we're paying for it. And if you haven't noticed this price so far, perhaps it's because your attention no longer belongs to you. Every app, every social network, every entertainment platform is designed to hack your brain, to make you unable to concentrate, to train you to react by impulse rather than by thought, to turn you into a passive consumer rather than a conscious creator. Because a person who can't focus can't learn. A person who can't stand boredom can't reflect. A person who can't think clearly can't question. And that's the ultimate goal. You don't need an authoritarian government when you have a constantly entertained population. You don't need censorship when people are no longer interested in questioning anything. You don't need chains when people imprison themselves in cages made of cheap pleasure, non-stop distractions, and an incessant search for instant gratification. Aldous Huxley said it clearly: the love of servitude will be our destiny, but it won't be an imposed servitude. It will be a chosen servitude disguised as freedom. And how do you do that? Through saturation. They taught us that freedom is having the ability to choose. But when they give you infinite options, what they really do is take away your power. You can choose from thousands of series, but none of them fulfill you. You can choose from thousands of songs, but you can't fully enjoy any of them. You can choose between thousands of people with a simple swipe of your finger, but each relationship becomes more superficial than the last. You think you have more possibilities, but in reality, you only have more distraction. And when everything is superficial, when everything is quick, when everything is replaceable, nothing has value. That's the trap. The society of pleasure doesn't make you freer. It makes you weaker, because the more conditioned you are to seek immediate pleasure, the less ability you have to resist discomfort. And discomfort is the basis of growth. There is no success without effort. There is no love without sacrifice. There is no purpose without pain. But the modern world doesn't want you to grow. It wants you to consume. Because a person who faces difficulties becomes stronger. A person who endures discomfort becomes independent. A person who learns to postpone gratification becomes dangerous, because they no longer need the cheap pleasures that the system offers. And that's where we come to the final question. How long will you accept this servitude disguised as freedom? How long will you allow the pursuit of pleasure to determine your life? How long will you be content with being controlled without realizing it. The truth is that you have two choices. You can continue in this endless cycle of distractions, living each day in search of the next dose of dopamine, or you can decide to regain your attention, your patience, your strength. But no one can do that for you. If you want to get out of this trap, you'll have to learn to resist the appeal of easy pleasure, constant stimulation, and the need for instant gratification. Because at the end of the day, true freedom has never been about having more options. It has always been in the ability to say no to what weakens you. Are you still the master of your own mind? Or have you become a slave to pleasure? That's a question few people want to face. But here's the truth. The first step to regaining your freedom isn't simply putting down your cell phone. It's not uninstalling an app. It's not running away from temptation, because the problem has never been pleasure itself. The real problem is the relationship you've built with it. If you are able to control your desire for immediate pleasure, you will be able to control your own life. If you can resist instant gratification, you'll have the power to build something real. If you can withstand boredom, you can start to really think, because pleasure is not the enemy. It never was. The enemy is the weakness it creates when you don't know how to use it. So the next time you feel that urgent need to look for a new distraction, take a break. Ask yourself, who is in control now? If the answer isn't you, then it's someone else. And that, my friend, is the worst kind of slavery. Invisible slavery. Slavery that doesn't require chains because it's voluntary. The slavery that masquerades as choice, when in fact it's just conditioning. Now that you know this, the real question isn't whether you're going to keep falling into this trap. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? Because here comes the scariest part. The pleasure that controls you today isn't just going to disappear because you finally understood how it works. Your brain has already been conditioned. Your patience has already been destroyed. Your attention has already been fragmented. And if you don't take action, you'll continue to follow the same path as the majority, because that's the system's great trick. It makes you believe that understanding the problem is the same as solving it, but it's not. Understanding without action is just another distraction. The illusion that knowing is enough, but knowing doesn't change anything if you don't do anything. So tell me, are you just going to close this video and carry on living as if nothing had happened? Or are you going to decide to take back control? I'm not saying you need to become a monk. I'm not saying that you need to eliminate all pleasure from your life. What I am saying is that if you don't learn to master pleasure, it will master you. And that choice, only you can make. What I'm telling you is simple, but powerful. Develop the most valuable muscle there is, self-control. The ability to decide when to stop, when to say no, when to get out of the cycle before it's too late. Because if you don't learn to master pleasure, pleasure will master you. And I'm going to tell you something that nobody tells you. The people who really win in life, those who build something bigger than themselves, who leave a legacy, who live with purpose, they're not the most talented. They're not the smartest, nor the luckiest. They are the ones who have learned to postpone immediate pleasure, to resist the temptation of the easy way out, to endure the discomfort of doing what is difficult. And here's the secret. These people weren't born that way. They built themselves every day by deciding what the majority is not willing to decide, by saying no to what others can't refuse, by mastering the art of doing what needs to be done, not what pleases them at the moment, because that's where the difference lies. True power lies not in following impulses, but in knowing how to control them. So here's the challenge for you. The next time you feel that urgent urge to seek immediate pleasure, stop, just for a second. Feel the impulse. Observe it. Recognize it for what it really is, an invisible current, placed in your mind to keep you distracted, to prevent you from achieving something greater. And then choose. Choose whether you really want to give in or whether you want to take back your power. Because every little decision counts. Every moment you choose to postpone the easy in order to do the important You are training your brain to be the master of itself. And if you start today, if you do it repeatedly, if you break the pattern, one day you'll wake up and realize something incredible. You're not like everyone else. You don't need constant validation. You don't need instant gratification. You don't need chains disguised as pleasure, because you belong to yourself. And when that happens, when you take back control, the system loses its power over you. Pleasure stops being a drug and becomes what it should always have been, a reward, not a prison. So tell me, are you going to remain a slave to pleasure? Or are you going to do what few have the courage to do? Let me know in the comments. Write, I take control. Because if you can write that, if you can commit yourself publicly, then you've already taken the first step. And if this video has made you question something inside yourself, if it has awakened something that you can no longer ignore, then subscribe. Because here, I'm not going to give you easy pleasure. I'm going to give you reality. And reality, even when it hurts, is the only way to be truly free.